So I went to the library and because I needed to write a script, and then I realized that the charger for my laptop was in here and not in the library, and I just went on a run, so my legs hurt. So by the time I walk back here, I don't want to have to walk back to the library. So I'm just going to do my homework on the couch. I love the couch. Long story short, someone put a couch in our dorm last year. I don't know who it was, but I really like them for it because it's comfortable. So today's video will be a response to the challenge by Matt that he prompted yesterday to define a genre by 5 pieces of its work. And I was thinking about it, and I actually might do 2 of these because I couldn't decide whether to do superheroes or westerns. I decided ultimately to do superheroes because I could go cross-medium into different areas, but I also really love westerns, and I think that will be an interesting challenge for me to split those up into 5 parts. So today will be superheroes. I might do challenges a little bit later in September. We will see. So superheroes are kind of easy because if you don't know, they're already basically split up into pretty defined time periods. The first being the Golden Age. This was when comic books first started to come about and superheroes first started to come about. There had been superhero-like characters before called Mystery Men. There had also been characters like Zorro who could technically count as a superhero and is an influence on Batman. But Golden Age is when superheroes started to really take off. And of course, the biggest superhero and the first iconic, I don't actually know if it was the first, I'd have to do a little bit more research on that, is Superman. But I didn't really want to recommend a Golden Age Superman comic. Instead, I wanted to recommend the Max Fleischer Superman animated shows. Now, these are short, 7 to 8 minute shorts. They are rotoscoped and really help define a lot about the character. This was still very early days Superman, so a lot of the character was defined outside of comic books in the radio series, in the television show, and in these cartoons. On top of that, they're just really well done cartoons. But also because it's kind of interesting to see the motion of it and the way it portrayed these comic books and really condensed them into very, very well done shorts. Secondly is the Silver Age. Now this is when censorship started to kind of arise because comic books had started getting more adult since their audience was growing up. And because of that, there was some backlash and they kind of had to back off a bit. And they couldn't show things like police being corrupt or monsters or the mafia. So instead what they did was resorted to really wacky supervillains. And I think the best and most entertaining example of the Silver Age is the Adam West Batman TV show. So what I'm recommending specifically is the 1966 Batman the movie. Just like Max Fleischer captured everything that was great about the Golden Age, this captures everything that's great about the Silver Age, but also makes it entertaining. The Silver Age can kind of be painful to get through sometimes. It's goofy and wacky. But this show is perfectly self-aware of that, and the movie is not only a great interpretation of the show, but it's also just a fun romp in general. I actually have a full review of this movie on this channel, which I'll link down in the description if you want to hear some of my extended thoughts on that. Eventually, the Comics Code Authority, which was kind of the main body of censorship, lost power because Stan Lee decided to print a comic without the code, and so we got into the Bronze Age, which is a little bit darker. We start seeing some more adult themes. This is when we get stuff like Watchmen. So I decided it's about time I actually recommend a comic book on this, so I'm going to recommend Batman Year One. I just realized all my stuff is DC. That's semi-problematic, but it will change by the end of this list. But Batman Year One, while not my favorite comic at all, is definitely a good interpretation of what people were starting to do in the Bronze Age. Because another big fact about the Bronze Age, besides just reimagining the world these heroes were in, were reimagining the heroes in general and the ideals of what they stood for and their themes. Then we get into the 90s, and this was a kind of hard time for me to pick because I know the least about the 90s, but doing some research I came down to the fact that I would have to recommend Death of Superman. Not only does this reflect the Dark Age of comics, which is what the 90s are sometimes called, but it also reflects what's going to happen in the mid-2000s, which is event comics and the rise of killing off characters or switching out characters for another character just to bring in readership or to have a huge event. This was really one of the first comics to do this, and definitely probably the first really big one. Just like Superman defined who superheroes were for a lot of people, his death really shook the market. Just to be clear, I don't think this is a very good comic book. And finally, we have where we are today. And it's obvious that I kind of have to pick a movie here, because while there are still good comic books being made today, and there is a rise of cartoon shows and TV shows, where the superhero genre... Oops, I have to lower the camera a bit. Where the superhero genre is really being defined is in the movies. This is what people recognize when they see superheroes. They think of the movies. And so I kind of had to struggle with figuring out what movie best represented comic book movies, which have their own very diverse history. But I figured I'm just going to stick to modern day, and I figured the best example of that would be the Avengers. Now, oh, hi there, Ben. Ah! I don't remember where I was because I talked to Ben for like 10 minutes. Okay. The Avengers! Yeah, so this is not my primary pick, but you can't really pick Dark Knight because there aren't really many superhero movies like it. Iron Man is too early in the process. It's kind of still an anomaly. I love all the X-Men, but while some of them reflect it, none of them reflect the pattern of superhero movies enough. And the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans would be great examples if I was... You're back. Oh my goodness.
I'm sorry.
Why? You're ruining everything! Ah! And the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies would be great examples if I was talking about comic book movies from like 10 years ago. But now with the focus on franchises and the expansion of these universes, the Avengers is the model for what a lot of people are trying to achieve. And even if they're not directly taking from the Avengers, which I really don't think many people have done yet, they are trying to do what the Avengers did first, which is why it's a good example. Also, it's the only really example we have. Justice League hasn't come out yet. X-Men hasn't been able to do anything quite like it. So I think the Avengers, if we are going off of the assumption, which I think is correct, which is that to define modern superheroes you have to go to the movies because that's how people experience them. And if we have to define what those movies are, I think the Avengers is the only pick, even though I feel like it's a little bit of an obvious one. But the fact that it's obvious makes it seem like it is the right pick, just maybe a boring one. Anyway, guys, thank you for tuning in, and goodbye.
Don't put that in, but save that tortured scream.
Oh, I'm putting it in.
Right at the end of the credits. So like, all right, thanks for the